Welcome to Rooted Agritourism. I'm Dr. Fiedler Mergen, owner of Sunny Mary Meadow, a you-pick flower farm, wedding florist, and event venue in central Minnesota. Our mission is to serve anyone rooted in agritourism, value-added agriculture, and rural entrepreneurship. The people turning ideas and raw products into thriving businesses and experiences. Let's dig in. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rooted Agritourism. And if you're brand new here, welcome. Thank you so much. I have a feeling I'm getting an influx of people because this week I was on the opening episode of season 2 of Dirt Diaries on RFD-TV and I was on Market Watch. So this is the perfect episode to start with because today I'm going to share a lot about my story and the direction this podcast is headed now that my book launch is done and it's out there. And our business is thriving and going. And one of the most important lessons that I learned over the last couple of years, and that is, how do you change the hearts and minds of people who are committed to misunderstanding you? And what do you do when they finally start to come around? So my name is Dr. Fiedler Mergen. I am a nurse practitioner by education, and I am a flower farmer by accident, and I am an entrepreneur by necessity. I am a remarried widow. I'm a mom of 2, and I live in central Minnesota. So my farm is a 6th generation farm. My daughters are the 6th generation to live here, but our business is essentially a startup. We started this entire business from scratch, this entire industry from scratch, and it really evolved and pivoted what it was. So when my husband passed away, I was left with this 40-acre property that had a big dairy barn that hadn't been in use for like 15 years and some older machine sheds, an old butcher shop that was, it's like 80 years old. The walls are crumbling down, and a property that my late husband would want me to raise my daughters on, and also a farmhouse that was 130 years old with a dirt floor and no up to code plumbing, electric, insulation, anything. But, in reality, it was a place that it was sentimental, but it was not going to financially support a family. And if I wanted to look at transitioning it to the next generation someday, which I know he would want to do, I had to change something. This couldn't just be a hobby farm. We're too close to suburban areas. We're right outside of St. Cloud Metro, which is, calling it a metro. There's probably some people that are going to laugh, but really it's about 200,000 people, comparable size to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Fargo, North Dakota. And, we're 5 minutes from town, essentially. And we're in a school district with a pretty high referendum, and property taxes are high. And there's just a lot of urban sprawl and a lot of housing developments. And, if I want to keep this farm a farm, I had to do something. And I felt very trapped. I felt like I didn't have a lot of options. I felt like I didn't have a lot of choices because I couldn't imagine selling it. That's not what Josh would want me to do, but I couldn't afford to keep it as it was. So how do I turn a sentimental asset into a revenue generating asset? And I ended up expanding more and more on our farm stand, our U-Picks, our bouquet subscriptions. In 3 years, I went from $7,000 in sales to over $150,000 in sales in my flower farm with really nothing value added. That was like market price for those flowers because people were going nuts in 2022, 2023 for local flowers because it was this brand new crave. I went to different breweries. I would bring enough for 50 people and I would sell out within a half an hour. And it was just amazing. But then, of course, people got used to it. I was there every week and, that season was great, but then I could just see it dwindling. And so I really wanted to get ahead of it. And I didn't want to keep having to market the same product to the same people because it was the same bouquet. So a subscription where you get a bouquet every week, come and pick your own flowers, go to a brewery and make a bouquet. It's the same kind of end product, same dollar point, and same customer base that I'm competing against myself. And it really was this cannibal business model where it was just competing with myself. And so I started adding weddings, I started adding workshops, I started adding corporate things, and eventually we outgrew our space. And I knew that I needed to invest in the property and make some big changes within the business and basically make it more enjoyable and sustainable for the people actually doing the work. And so that is kind of where this story pivots when I decided to build an on-the-farm event venue on my farm with a massive walk-in cooler, a farm store and a space to just do all of the work. And I really changed the rebrand from Flower Farmer Forum is what this podcast used to be called. And we changed it to Rooted Agritourism because this stopped being just a flower story. It turned into entrepreneurship, agritourism, rural economic development, tourism in general, land use, policy, leadership, innovation in agriculture. And if we want farmland to stay farmland, we need to talk honestly about how farms can survive. And that can be through diversification. It can be through value-added agriculture. It can be for direct to consumer. And all of these different things is what the conversations really started reaching around, rather than just flower farming and how to grow flowers. And so we've had intermittent episodes of this intentionally. We've taken a pause for almost the last year. It's just been when I have something to say, I say it, but we'll get back to our weekly recordings here soon. Now that my book, Flowers Bloom Anyway, is out into the world. It's been about 3 months since we published. So I had kind of a whirlwind media and book tour. I made the USA Today bestseller list. It's amazing. Our farm just opened officially. We got the certificate of occupancy for our building in November, and yeah, just able to kind of do that. But I want to give just a bit of an explanation of, agritourism 101. And the reason that this matters is because the small farms are struggling. The cost of machinery, the types of equipment, the cost of land, that traditional agriculture doesn't support the smaller acreage. And so a lot of counties have these comprehensive plans and really what they look like, why counties create them, how they can encourage diversification. And my county itself is showing that we need to have businesses such as mine as ways to diversify agriculture, contribute to the economic development, and stop putting such a tax burden on traditional commodity crops such as corn, soybeans, pigs, dairy. Those are the 4 things that Stearns County, the county that I live in, is so well known for, but they take on all of the risk and all of the burden because they own all the land. And so that was the major goal for agriculture, was agritourism and diversifying that to help with the economic development and keep land use in the hands of families. And so for me, I had this vision on my farm. This all started about 2 years ago, and there was a need for a gathering space. I needed bathrooms. I needed a bigger walk-in cooler. I needed a space for people to be. I thought about doing a pavilion in the summer, but flowers are so hot. I wanted it air conditioned and a place to host those showers, those celebrations of life, those corporate retreats. People are coming out for a farm tour or a team building activity. They want a space to gather. And so I needed to get a conditional use permit within my county. And that is through the planning commission, basically say, hey, here's my business plan. This is what I'm going to be using my property for rather than just residential. It's still agriculture. And I have to follow all existing rules that are in place as far as noise and public gathering ordinance, and everything that was in place for me as a resident is still in place as it goes, but just making sure that people understand. And so I filled out the application, exactly answered every single question that was on there. And there's, a routine review and a chance for neighbors to come in and express any concerns before they happen. And as long as it's within what the law allows, then it would continue to move forward. And I had a couple of neighbors that were really concerned about traffic or noise or change, when really everything that I had been doing, how I had been operating my farm, was actually pretty chaotic. I would have probably 200 people coming at any undefined hour because there was a pickup window, and none of that needed a permit. You don't need a permit to do that. And I could continue doing that. And I was trying to just streamline it a little more predictability. But that part of the business really wasn't changing. It's just if I was going to actually rent out the space and have this building a place of public accommodation where people can do it, then I needed this permit. And so neighbors were a little bit concerned. And, ultimately I had to just speak up at my county meeting. And, one neighbor, his biggest concern was, if you want to have a business, do it in town. That was their concern. Another neighbor just really argued that this wasn't farming. And he argued that I would now be zoned commercial. And he argued that I shouldn't be allowed to do this. And my response was, just talking a lot about the Farm Bill and marketing assistance for specialty crops, how cut flowers are specialty crops, the USDA's definition of agritourism, the county's definition of agritourism, the state's definition of agritourism, the county's goals, and really just say, like, sorry, you're wrong. And so ultimately, at the end of it, they're like, well, if there's no other concerns, then we're done. Well, another neighbor really wanted some interesting restrictions, such as putting the types of events that I can have, limitations there. They wanted any guests to have to bring government issued IDs, just some weird, strange restrictions that like the county attorney got involved, and ultimately wanting to like redefine agritourism, and just it would have been extremely prohibited down the road for what my business was having. But it hit so hard because my husband's wake was here on the farm and I was trying to build something for our daughters. And these were neighbors that were here. And it just started getting a lot of misinformation was spreading. And one of the county commissioners took hold to it. And again, we're talking a handful of houses against literally thousands of customers that I have had over the years that were very supportive of it. And I tried to mitigate their fears, saying, hey, you know, this is a farm store that's open for people to come get flowers. Our township road isn't going to get any busier. They're going to come from the main road. It's mainly for me to do flowers and to make the wedding flowers. And if we have an event, it's like 80 people at a bridal shower max, which that's a huge shower. Most of them are like 40 people. And it's 30 cars at the most, because usually people carpool, and trying to meet them. And they just were not open to hearing it. And this county commissioner decided, since there were neighbors that were mad, he said that he wanted a second public hearing. He requested it to let them have a chance to be heard again. And the other commissioners said, she's not doing anything illegal. She's not doing anything wrong. They had a chance to be heard. We do not make a second public hearing just because people don't get their way. That's not how the process works. We're not going to do this. And he walked out of the meeting, stormed out. It was all over the news. It kept escalating. My neighbors went to the local paper and said that I destroyed their peace and that they had no idea that I was even operating this business, which I have no idea how that could be possible. And it was so blown out of proportion. And this county commissioner told the local news that I would have WeFest, which WeFest is a massive 100,000 person 3-day country music festival held in Minnesota every year. And nothing about my permit allows overnight camping or music at that decibel level or music after that time or just anything like that. It just kept being compared to that and people were quiet. And so what happens is I stayed silent for a while. I said no comment. I said no comment to the newspapers, and people started writing their own stories. So finally I went to the large statewide newspaper for the entire state of Minnesota and said, well, here's my perspective of what's happening. And this county commissioner that is spreading this misinformation is leading to harassment of my family. I'm being honked at by these same specific neighbors, given the middle finger, screamed at, called a liar. My character is being questioned. I haven't done anything wrong. The county attorney did an interview with a different newspaper saying like, well, she followed the process. This is what the process is. And it was really just like a lesson on civil process and permitting process. And finally, I ended up filing a complaint against this county commissioner. I just wrote it to the county administrator and I said, please, tell him to stop spreading this misinformation. And I had very detailed quotes about what I could or couldn't do and information about why that was untrue. And he did accuse me of fraud during a public meeting. He said that my application was fraud and for us to allow him to do that was fraud. And we'll find out in a few years what this really was. And it just was so blown out of proportion. And I said, please have him stop. I would love a public apology. That would be great. And can you please do some sort of remedial education? Because he seems to not understand how the process works. Well, that letter ended up going public. I didn't mean to send it to the papers or anything, but once you file that, it's public information. And so then that's what went to the news, and overwhelmingly, people were very, very supportive of my business. And I would say at the end of it, where we're at now, here's the lesson that I learned from it all. And it's been a year. We've been open for 6 months. And I finally got a phone call, my husband did, from one of our neighbors last week saying, I think we were misinformed. And that was my whole point, was they were working off of the information that they were giving and the lens of which they view things. And it just escalated. And the thing is, when it comes to leadership, You can either be a thermostat or you can be a thermometer. And leaders set the temperature. And that influence that county commissioner had was really just scary. And the complaint that I filed, it was not revenge, it was not anger, it was for accountability and leadership and process. And so now the building has been open. I have the certificate of occupancy. We've had dozens of events, literally thousands of visitors. There's been no noise problem, no traffic disaster. Last week, we got a call from a neighbor, and he just said, ultimately, we see that it's going well. We see that none of our fears have come to fruition. We really do wish you the best. And at this point, it's on me to say, okay, it's done now. Now we move forward. Have I gotten an apology from everyone? No, but just being able to have that ripple effect of show and tell. And I knew that was what was going to happen, was I was going to have to put my money where my mouth was, show that this is what's actually happening, that it's a wonderful thing for the community. It's the wonderful thing for people in the area. It's a wonderful thing for our economy. And truly, it's a wonderful thing for the neighbors. My 40-acre of meadow is still staying. We literally tore down 2 really old buildings and built a new building in their place. And we added another second driveway to have a different customer entrance. That is what ended up happening. We didn't turn any tillable land into a venue. We didn't stop production of any crops. We literally tore down 2 buildings that were really rough and falling apart, and we built a new one in their space that's actually smaller square footage. I want to say that people don't change their minds because of arguments. They will change because they experience something different and they gain understanding, and time passes and fear fades. And this is not the time for me to say, I told you so. And so leave room for people to come around. Do not humiliate, do not punish. Don't weaponize the change, just welcome it. And the older I get, the less interested I am in being right, and the more interested I am in being effective and just moving forward. And if someone changes their mind, I don't need an apology. I just need a partnership, and that works. And so the reason this story matters is because it's not just about one flower farm. I've had so many farms reach out and say, thank you for doing this, because so many people suffer in silence, and people are mad and they get bullied out of what they wanted to do or didn't want to do with their farms. And it's about rural entrepreneurship and small farming and economic development and innovation and community. And the reality is do we actually want farms to survive, or we just like the idea of them? Because agritourism creates jobs, tourism, local spending, diversification, keeping families in the land. I'm going to give you another story. It's 10 miles away. And this is hearsay. Again, I'm going to be very clear that I have never talked to the farmer that this is in relation to. I do not know their name. I don't know anything about them, but I've heard it from a reliable source that this is what happened. There are about 200 acres that have always been potatoes since I've lived up here for over a decade, and it is turning into a solar farm. There are solar panels going up on that 200 acres that had been potatoes. The story that I have been told is that the irrigation permit was not going to transfer to the next generation, and he couldn't transfer it to his daughter, who wanted to continue farming it or renting it out for potatoes, because it's good land for potatoes, but it has to be irrigated. So was it caught between a rock and a hard place, and said, okay, we're going to sign a contract and we're turning that land, because if it can't be irrigated, it's essentially worthless. And so since that permit was not going to transfer, they're now putting up a solar farm on that 200 acres. And these are the conversations we have to have. I know people would rather see pumpkin patches or places be a hayfield or a beautiful meadow or even corn or soybeans or something like that. But that's not always the reality. It doesn't always work. And so if you are building something, if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a community listener, if you are anyone that's been misunderstood, I just want you to, tell the truth, document things, lead with integrity, follow the process, play the long game, protect your dream, keep moving forward, and bloom anyway. So before I let you go, I just want to say a quick thank you to those that have been inviting me to speak around the country. I have some upcoming events as a speaker. Securian Financial out of St. Paul, Minnesota has me speaking to life insurance professionals that are flying in across the nation for the day. So I will be there on Wednesday this week. And then in about 6 weeks, I'm going to Hague, North Dakota for their Women in Ag event, speaking to about 100 women, sharing my story. In November, I will be at the Minnesota Farm Bureau annual meeting. and I will be delivering the closing keynote. I will be at Women in Agribusiness Summit in New Orleans in September, speaking on an entrepreneurship panel. And then in March, I will be at Iowa Farm Bureau's Acres of Opportunity Conference, where I will be presenting both the opening keynote and a breakout session. So if you are interested in bringing me in for a keynote, a breakout session, a workshop, a retreat, or something virtual, please visit lizfiedlermergen.com. And we've also shifted everything over there. Everything should forward from sunnymarymeadowcoaching.com, the old website that we have. It should all just forward to lizfiedlermergen.com, and everything kind of lives there. So every episode of Rooted Agritourism, formerly Flower Farmer Forum, is available as a blog article, and every speaking topic has its own dedicated page, so you can kind of see how presentations are specifically tailored to your audience within that audience. And thank you so much for having me. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Rooted Agritourism. If you enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star review and share it with someone who would find it helpful or inspiring. Your support helps us reach more rural entrepreneurs, dreamers, and doers just like you. You can explore all of our resources at sunnymarymeadowcoaching.com, where you'll find each episode in blog form along with free resources to help grow your business. You'll also find info on upcoming on-farm and virtual workshops, classes, and courses. Be sure to check out our monthly membership, Foundations of Peddling Perishable Products, where you'll get access to a full library of our original course content, plus ongoing support through monthly virtual meetups with others in the industry. Just click the link in the show notes or our bio to learn more. We'd love to have you join us. Until next time, keep growing with purpose and stay rooted.